Un evento muy cultural, no tan comercial, pero ¿qué se podría hacer?
No, probably not. Go ahead. No se preocupe. No te preocupes, Grace.
Okay, let's get started. Vamos a empezar. Welcome, everybody.
No se oye el micrófono.
No funciona el micrófono, pero creo que es cuestión nada más de proyectar, como en el salón de clases. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Welcome all to this wonderful event, the book presentation of Thanks to Life, Biography of Violeta Parra, by our esteemed friend and colleague, Erika Verba, from Cal State Los Angeles, California State University, Los Angeles. My daughter graduated from that university, so very happy to host Erika with her recently released book. I'm Rubén Hernández León, director of the Latin American Institute, professor of sociology here at UCLA. And I'm very pleased because I've known Erika for quite some time, but also because we have a long-standing relationship with Cal State LA and with the Latin American Studies program, with the Association of Colleges and Community Colleges of Southern California, SCALAS. We support activities there and throughout the southern part of the state through our Title VI grant. So it's once again my distinct pleasure to welcome Erika, to welcome all our distinguished guests, the Consul General of Chile, who will address the audience in just a few minutes. All of our guests and attendees, I hear that some from far away, all the way in Chile, who are connected via Zoom to this event. And well, without further ado, I'm going to have the Consul General of Chile in Los Angeles, Francisco Javier Leal Lisboa, address the audience and give a brief introduction. He'll be followed by our esteemed colleague in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Professor Veronica Cortines, who will moderate the event, and then that will be followed by Erika Verba's presentation. Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I will speak in Spanish for my remarks, which is my native language. So let me introduce myself. Soy Francisco Leal Lisboa, Cónsul General de Chile, y estoy muy feliz de estar esta tarde en UCLA para esta actividad relacionada con nuestra gran Violeta. Distinguido señor Rubén Hernández León, director del programa de estudios latinoamericanos de la Universidad de California, Los Ángeles. Distinguida señora Erika Verba, autora del libro Thanks to Life, A Biography of Violeta Parra. Distinguida señora Verónica Cortines, profesora de esta importante casa de estudios. Distinguido cuerpo académico, estudiantes, colegas de ProChile, señoras y señores. Hoy nos reunimos para conversar sobre el libro Thanks to Life, A Biography of Violeta Parra, escrito por la profesora Erika Verba, que es una detallada y rigurosa biografía de la destacada cantautora, florista y artista visual chilena, una mujer fundamental en la cultura latinoamericana. Su vida y obra constituyen no solo un legado artístico invaluable, sino también un objeto de estudio multidisciplinario para todo un continente, que interpela desde la música, la literatura, la historia, la sociología, la antropología y las artes visuales. Violeta Parra fue una artista integral, lo que se encuentra relevado en el texto de la profesora Verba. Su trabajo trasciende géneros y categorías. Fue compositora, poeta, bordadora e investigadora del folclore y gestora cultural, pero por sobre todo con un interés intelectual y popular en el más profundo sentido de la palabra. Su obra nos invita a pensar en el arte no como un producto aislado, sino como una forma de construcción de memoria, identidad y resistencia. La biografía que nos presenta la profesora Verba tiene como uno de los ejes centrales el análisis de la multifacética carrera de Violeta Parra, su música, sus composiciones, su labor como investigadora del folclore y también su incursión en las artes visuales, que culminó con una histórica exposición en el Museo Louvre en 1964. Y es que en todo sentido, Violeta Parra desafía nuestras formas tradicionales de entender las artes y el conocimiento. Sin haber pasado por aulas universitarias, construyó una obra de rigor investigativo notable. Recorrió campos, pueblos, ferias y rincones olvidados para recopilar, preservar y revalorizar el canto popular chileno. Su trabajo puede leerse como una etnografía viva, hecha con oído sensible y compromiso profundo con su entorno. De este modo, su capacidad creativa no solo ayudó a preservar, sino que dio lugar a una obra propia que dialoga con la tradición, pero que la subvierte, la expande, la llena de contenido político y personal. Canciones como Gracias a la vida o Volver a los 17 siguen emocionando al mundo por su sensibilidad y profundidad. Violeta Parra fue también una mujer valiente que enfrentó con firmeza los perjuicios de su tiempo. Se atrevió a decir y a vivir con libertad, a amar sin ataduras, a denunciar injusticias y a cantar lo que muchos callaron. Su vida fue intensa, luminosa y a la vez marcada por el dolor, el mismo dolor que supo transformar en arte. Thanks to Life, de la profesora Verba, nos ofrece una mirada íntima, crítica y contextualizada de la vida de Violeta Parra, revelando su importancia cultural y su legado artístico al mismo tiempo que rescata su figura como una mujer transgresora adelantada a su tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Uy. Buenas tardes a todos, también a todos los que nos están mirando, acompañando a la distancia por Zoom, vía Zoom. Tenía yo dos presentaciones, una corta y una larga, voy a leer la corta, pero en inglés, así que no tengo el lujo que tiene el cónsul de hacer lo que quiere, entonces... Erika Verba is director and professor of Latin American Studies at Cal State LA. Her research interests include the cultural Cold War, the role of music in social movements, and the intersection of gender and class politics in 20th century Latin America. She has received multiple grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Mellon Foundation, the Social Science Research Council, the Fulbright, and the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. She is a founding member of the Southern California Association of Latin American Studies and the recipient of the Brad Burns, our former colleague, Award for Service to the Pacific Coast Council on Latin American Studies. As a musician, because that's what she is, and founding member of the US-based new song groups Sabia and Desborde, Erika has been performing Violeta Parra since 1976. On a more personal note, I organized a homenaje to Violeta Parra a few years ago, which it did, and Erika, of course, was invited, but the treasure, I just have one, so I will pass it around so you can see it, is in the back. It's a picture of Erika, Pete Seeger, and Juan Pablo González playing together in one of his bands. So it's a beautiful, I think, treasure, no? That Juan Pablo gave to me in order to include in the program. So I'll pass it around so you can see it. So Erika, congratulations, this amazing work. I don't agree with everything. The San Carlos story with the San Fabián de Alico. I'm joking. Sorry, no. Joking. Because these two small towns have a big dispute. Where was she born? And so...
you're partidario. I like that.
But no, really congratulations. You have done an amazing work. Very clear, very readable, that includes all the past, and it's a lot of bibliography. So congratulations, and you have the floor. So here, if you want to see the picture, look at the beautiful.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess so. That would be good. Let's just look at the same. So this is the this is the first book. I don't need. Is this for the Zoom?
No,
it's not for the Zoom.
It's not working.
So, but I'm wondering if it's how the Zoom.
They can hear you.
Okay,
The
fine.
microphone's super sensitive.
I wasn't expecting, this is the first time I've done a book talk that wasn't actually organized as questions. So I will talk briefly about the book because I think that the council has done such an amazing job, if it's possible, to very briefly explain Violeta Parra's life to those who are not familiar with her. And I'm guessing many people here, and I'm sure on the Zoom, are already familiar with her. So if it's okay, I'll give you a little biography of the book itself, because I think that would be a good starting point. And then I would love to just simply open it up to questions. I want to know why you think it's San Pedro and not San Gabriel de Arico. But and I'm sure other people have other questions. So I'm going to start with the presumption of familiarity or a wonderful introduction, so I don't have to try to repeat it. And so let me just talk briefly about why I wrote a biography of Violeta Parra, because I'm not Chilean. I have a kind of generic, I have a confusing last name that it sounds as if I'm Latino, but I'm not. You can call me Erica, you don't have to call me Erika. But when I was in high school, I was just going to do brief biography, like explain why I wrote, how I met Violeta Parra, we'll say, and then I'll talk about the book. So I met Violeta Parra when I was in high school. It was 74, and there was a Chilean family in my town. They were a very artistic family. One of them is Miguel Picker, and he is a producer and a filmmaker. He did El Odisea de Ulysses, of Chilean.
La Odisea de
Ulysses, and also one on Siqueiros. And then his brother is Sebastian Picker, who's a painter. So I wasn't crazy. They were really interesting people that have gone on to become really interesting people. And the father was studying radical education. And for me, who was in high school, two things happened. One, I was sort of introduced to the music, the Nueva Canción, right? And the other thing was, of course, it was a political awakening because I was an American teenager and I had no idea that there had been a coup in Chile. And my friend Miguel was really angry because he wasn't at his house. He wasn't home. He was uprooted. And here he was in the United States, really the belly of the beast. And nobody had any idea what he'd gone through in our high school. And so it was very much a political awakening and an artistic awakening. And just so you can capture the moment, Inti Imani was touring with Joan Jara at the time. Joan Jara was the translator. And when they came to Boston, because this was in the early days, they would stay in my friend's apartment's floor, right? And really early days where the sort of the solidarity movement with Chile was just getting off its feet, which is why I'm sure that I hope for their sake that they had better accommodations, the next year. And so that was a long time ago, and it sort of shaped my life without, you don't know at the time, but I can look back and say, oh, my life has sort of continued on from that moment. And so then I'll get to the, so I always knew I wanted to do work with Violeta Parra. Mostly the work that I had done was musical. In I don't remember the year, 1997, I want to say, we applied for a grant to do a concert of her work here, and a tribute concert. It was 21 songs, 14 musicians, sold out at Barnesdale Park, and we did it again at the Grand Performances. So lots of people got to hear it. And that was sort of I guess a high point musically. And then I became a scholar. So I decided to sort of use the tools that I learned as a graduate student in history here at UCLA. Bradford Burns was my advisor, and then Jose Moya. I know Kevin well. He was a year ahead of me. And so I ended up writing a biography. Oh, I knew I wanted to write a biography of Violeta Parra. And so then I'll talk a little bit about the book. The problem was I was kind of stuck at this point, which I think many of us do get stuck with someone like Violeta Parra, that I didn't know how to not write a hagiography. I'm going to borrow sorry. Lo tengo prestado.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't know how not to, I was kind of, thank you. I was kind of stuck in this mode. This is what I needed.
Sí, pero porque quieres agua.
Yeah, gracias. I was stuck at that, like, look how amazing Violeta Parra is. Isn't she amazing? Look at this. Look at that. Isn't she, what a wonderful woman, and also amazing, and right? And that doesn't really make for a good biography, although it's really, true. Nothing that I said wasn't true. And I think the more I learned about her, what ended up happening was I realized that how much she was also the inventor of herself as an artist, which artists are, right? They have a public persona, and realized also how wonderfully contradictory she was. And as a historian, you must the fun part of history is when you get the fun, and the cruel part is when you get the contradictions, right? When you the easy one is that there's two towns fighting about it. I can just say two towns are fighting that and sort of draw the lesson from that. But there's some really hard ones in there to make sense of. So I will tell you, I do want to read the guiding question of my biography, because it was once I got the guiding question that I kind of really was able to find a way to answer the question. Does that make sense? Not really. But maybe when I give you the guiding question of it. One of probably the most noted thing that she did in her lifetime, because she was both very well known in Chile and not necessarily appreciated as she should be, and we can talk about that for many reasons. Anyway, and in Europe, she really was, I hate to say it, but really the flavor of the month. It was Violeta Parra with tapestries, one from Chile, that was important, but it was Chile. Next week, it could have been the puppets from Indonesia. She didn't have kind of name recognition, actually not even that of Atahualpa Yupanqui, who really was a name at some point during his lifetime in Europe. So I want to give this quote that is the guiding quote of the book. And it is, she, of course, one of the traits of her personality is she thinks that anything is possible, right? So she starts, she's stuck in bed she's already in her 40s. It's 1959, and she's stuck in bed. The doctor won't let her go and perform because she has hepatitis. So she starts embroidering these tapestries that will end up in the Louvre Palace, in the Museum of Decorative Arts, which is housed in the Louvre Palace. But don't tell anyone it was always just the Louvre. There's no problem there, right? She was in the Louvre. So here's a woman who's been making art since 1959. It's 1964. She gets to Paris again, second time she's there. And her friends are all musicians and they're artists, right? I'm thinking of it's Hector Miranda from Los Calchaquis. He's also an abstract artist, and he's just been part of a huge show at the Museo I'm saying it in Spanish, Museo de Arte Moderno, the modern art, and with like other Latin American artists, all abstract, and some very famous people from Chile that she knows. Roberto Mata is there, and she's like, well, I can do that too. Right? I mean, she'd already decided that. So in 1963, she writes a letter to the director. She gets the ambassador of Chile to write a letter to the head of the Museum of Modern Art, to be very clear, and says, I'd like to have a show. Or through the ambassador says she'd like to have a show. And the Museum of Modern Art's not for them, she's folkloric, right? She's a woman, she embroiders, So she sends her to the Museum of Decorative Arts, which is where you would have more folkloric and furniture. Let's face it, and also art. I mean, it was Picasso had a solo show, but he was Picasso. She was a Chilean artist whose name was Violeta Parra on the bottom of the. She was Chilean tapestries. It wasn't Violeta Parra. Anyway, at one point, backing up, I'm trying to get to the question. So she goes to the director of the Museum of Decorative Arts, shows her work. He says, this is fantastic. Étonnant. That was the word. It's spectacular. And then he shows it to the committee, and they say, she's just too much of an unknown. We can't have her have a show. So she's heartbroken. And she writes to a friend, and she says, and I'm sorry, because I'm going to read it in English because I don't have the Spanish here. How could I have an exhibit at the Louvre? I, who am the ugliest woman on the planet, who come from a tiny country, from Chillán, at the end of the earth. And that became the guiding question of my biography. How does a woman who was not seen as particularly beautiful, she had a face that was pockmarked by smallpox, and people in Chile literally referred to her as fea, including in obituaries. I have two where they refer to her as that way. I mean, it was sort of a known thing about her, even though she was very beautiful. Beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, but she was considered an unattractive woman by many, which is, with women, it's easier if you're attractive, let's face it. And then, and she's from the south of Chile, from Chillán is the big city. That's not even where she was born. We can argue about where she was born. And Chile's at that point, Chile was fairly isolated. It was, the end of the earth, right? So, how did I answer that question? And I'll just throw out two themes of the book. that I think make it different than other biographies, because there are wonderful biographies of Violeta Parra. I like to say that mine is needed because it's in English, and I think it was needed in English, but I also do feel like I have made a contribution beyond that. And I would say the two things that are my contribution is I do look at her performance. It sounds terrible when I say it because it sounds like I'm calling her a fake, but it's not. But I look at her performance of authenticity, sort of how she became this figure. So that when she died, people did say she was a campesina, when in fact, she never took care of animals. I mean, she wasn't a campesina, right? Her mother definitely was, no question about it, raised campesina, but lived in the city most of her life. But Violeta Parra never had. So anyway, how these myths came about, and really her contribution to these myths. So is that, and the other is the transnational aspect of her life. When you start looking at all of the musical things she did, they're actually parts of strange thing. They're nationalist movements. The folklore is national, very nationalistic, in fact, but they're transnational moments. The folklore revival of the 1950s that she absolutely spearheaded in Chile as she collected hundreds of thousands of songs, thousands, you can say, was absolutely also a transnational phenomenon. It was happening in Britain at the time, which is why the BBC was so interested in her. Pete Seeger, the Weavers, let's see, everywhere, pretty much Argentina, of course, they're actually calling it a boom. Juan Pablo Gonzalez told me I couldn't call Chile's a boom. It wasn't that as big as it wasn't a boom. But Argentina really did have a boom. And it really was happening all over Europe as well, except for two countries, Germany and France. And my theory is that the word folk had been so discredited by the Nazis that they just couldn't bring themselves to have a folk revival at that point. So there's that. And then, of course, the protest music of the 60s. I'm very relieved that young people all know who Bob Dylan is now, and Joe Baez. That's very good for me in my book, because Joe Baez recorded Violeta Parra's songs since 1972. But this thing of one of the scholars calls them guitar poets. He only lists men. So these men with guitars that write these long songs that have incredible lyrics. That was happening everywhere. So that Victor Jara is the Bob Dylan of Chile. Bob Dylan is the Victor Jara of Chile, and somehow Violeta Parra never got on the list, but she is clearly that, right? She's clearly maybe a cross between Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan, but she is that and a woman, which made her unusual. So those two things, and just to give you an idea of how outrageous this woman was, I will give you an example. So she, because it fits so well with this, and then I'm going to shut up and ask you something. But so she comes back from her first European trip. She's there for 2 years, and in Europe, people that are part of the folk revival in the United States and Europe love to sing songs from other countries. I'm a total fan of Pete Seeger. I have a record from maybe 1963. I was very little bit, but I mean, we have the record. I know all the songs, and it's from music all over the world. And he sings in Russian, and he sings in Swahili, and he swings. Maybe he sings in Spanish. I'm trying to. Yes, prisionero número 9, right? You know, like so ocho numbers. Okay. Anyway, the Spanish Civil War, right? So and the Weavers love doing that. The Weavers are doing a whim away, right? And then Chile. So Violeta Parra comes back, and remember now, she is a symbol of Chile. She is the most Chilean. She only sings songs from Chile. She only collects songs from Chile, and she only records, and this is true, she only records from Chile. The only exception is 2 songs from Rapa Nui, which used to be called Easter Island, because it was a Chilean, Holland, whatever you want to call it. So that was okay. And then she stopped even doing that. She would only do Chilean songs. But for 6 months of her life, after her first trip, she does Israeli songs. She does songs in French. She does songs in Italian, and she does songs in Quechua, which she learned in Paris, to be very clear. And she clearly learned them from records that the folk revival, the international folk revival in Paris. So that's what I love about her. And then she realized it didn't really go. I mean, like, well, if they can do it, I can do it, right? Like, if they can sing my songs, I get to sing their songs. And it didn't really go over well. Like, if she's going to be a Chilean campesina, she can't be singing Israeli folk songs, right? So it didn't last very long. But when she came back, that's the kind of person she was. It's like, well, I'm going to sing songs in Hebrew. Why not, right? And I'll stop there, because I think what I think is so inspiring about her is the possibilities that she opened up to herself, that nothing is impossible, which I think allowed her to create this incredible opus that Consul has referred to here. So I think really eloquently, really capturing how versatile she was as an artist. So I appreciate that I don't have to do it. I did such a good job. So thank you for that. So I don't know now, maybe I could sit at the table, we could have a conversation instead of, would that work for this thing or?
Yeah,
not?
I can switch the camera around too. Want to sit like?
Yeah, I mean, is
over
that
here?
okay with people? Do you
That's-
want to have a
yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can I borrow your book? Oh, you want, do you need it? No. Okay.
You want to moderate? You want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
You wanna- Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Anybody would like to have to ask a question? To start off. Let me start. Okay. There are some things that you say in the introduction that make me very curious.
Uh-huh.
First, let me congratulate you also for the acknowledgements because many people nowadays in academia don't even thank their sources. It's a big problem in academia, I think. But not only do you thank everybody, but the amount of people you consulted with, that shows how thorough your work is.
But I forgot one, so I'm gonna say it now. Fernando Venegas, I mean, I'm heartbroken. I footnoted him, but Fernando Venegas, with the second edition's gonna fix that problem.
But I mean, the range, the variety, the amount of not only books, of institutions you consulted, that shows the breadth and the idea that in this book, in that sense, is a model. Good work takes time. And students have to understand that much work it doesn't. So it takes time. So I think you have achieved a lot. You contributed a lot. As far as I understand, correct me if I am wrong, but I think you are the first to look at the archives from Gilbert, for instance. I don't remember seeing that anywhere else.
Oh, no, Herrero. So very recently.
Very little, no? I know Herrero very well, yes.
Yeah. So there's a wonderful Chilean journalist who it's very smart for the year 2017, which was the centennial of Violeta Parra's birth. Did a fantastic book with a very good archival research that definitely has helped me. And so what happened? Gilbert Favre is the famous lover of Violeta Parra, in that the love of her life. I think she would say that too. He's Run Run, if you know her songs, Run Run Se Fue Pa'l Norte. And he did write a diary. He didn't publish it. He wrote a whole diary, but later in life, more close to when he died in the 1990s. And it has been made accessible on the web. So, his widow actually gave me some photos for me. So that was wonderful. But, it's one of the many sources. I did want to say, this really does feel, and I do say that in the acknowledgements, this feels so much like a collective project, and it has been a joy.
That's your generosity, Erika.
No,
It's your work.
it really has
It's not
been.
collective.
No.
You wrote it.
But that help, like, I mean, this generosity, and Los Chilenos, I have to say, there's this one gentleman, Alejandro Munda, where basically, I think his motto was, my sources are your sources, mi casa tu casa, my sources are yours. Like, there's nothing, it was none of this, like, mezquina, like, I found it, so it's mine. This incredible, and just such a conversation, because I will admit there are things that I will never understand about Chile. I'm sure there's things about Violeta Parra that I don't know, right? I mean, I think I do a good job. but and I think other people will write. I hope that this is not, I know it's not the first biography. I don't think it'll be the last, and we'll all have different ways of looking at it, but, I think it's been a wonderful
biographies in the proper sense. There's not so many.
No, there's not many.
No,
There's actually not. No, this is I mean, I actually would like it to be translated in Spanish. I think it's something new. I do think it's something new. Oh, I'll just give you an example. Juan Pablo Gonzalez, who came here to speak, he found 110.
The one who's in the picture.
Yeah.
Give me back my program.
He got his PhD in ethnomusicology from UCLA. We played in a group together while he was here, and he has written everything there is on musicology and ethnomusicology in Chile. And we always thank him if we write something that we were allowed to write something, because he's written it all. He's just very prolific. But he did make 110 comments on my manuscript. I want to say not all of them were right. I was right in some of them, but most of them he was right. And
But
he
the
really,
dialogue
yeah.
is really productive.
Beautiful. No, he
Yeah.
told me, I kept that I translated Wasso as cowboy and he just couldn't stand it. And I think he's right. It's not a cowboy. It upset him. So he stopped after a while, he stopped writing. Just to say, he just sort of begged me after like 10 comments on cowboy. He said, just don't use the word, use Wasso. And he convinced me. I mean, if that was so upsetting to him, it couldn't be right. And so I explained that Wasso is like a gouge, like the word in Spanish, Mexico, what's it called?
Carlos Sanchez.
No,
Ranchero.
Not vaquero.
Vaquero.
Not vaquero, that's a cowboy, it's not that, it's, I'll have to find it, it's,
It doesn't.
charro,
Charro.
thank you very much, charro and gaucho, that's the closest thing, because, vaquero sounds more like the American cowboy, and Wasso's not really that, like, they're not out in the, they're in the, yeah, they're in a phone. Okay, so, did I answer the question? No,
I was praising it.
No question.
Because I know they're main students here, so I'm talking to them too.
Oh, I took a long time. My undergraduate thesis, I don't know if it's boasting or admitting too much. My undergraduate thesis, which was written in 1980, was on her autobiography and thesis. That's a long time.
So a question that I do have from the introduction, right there, you say something that surprised me, and I have no idea whether you are making a guess or what you base it on. That if she were alive today, she would be diagnosed with bipolar disease.
Oh, that is the consensus. And one of my friends, so I can tell you, I don't like doing this because I'm not a psychologist. I never studied psychology. I do have a friend who she Xeroxed the pages of bipolar, the symptoms of bipolar syndrome. I don't know how they call it. And it was quite, I felt almost, it was unbelievable in how it described her. It did fit. She sounded like someone who would be diagnosed because you have highs and lows. So Violeta Parra sometimes was in bed and couldn't get out. And other times she was up before dawn and would go until midnight. It was incredibly productive. So that's one of the things. They actually thought she was manic depressive in her life, which is sort of the thing. The people, there's a footnote about it. Someone who is the son of someone whose father went to the same therapist as Violeta Parra went to, supposedly. So that's very word of mouth, right? Like the man's father's friend went to the therapist, same therapist as Violeta, says that he was the bipolar. So that was the diagnosis. So there's the ups and downs. This is an interesting one. Bipolar people can have impossible ambitions, and she did, but she got so her impossible ambition of having her art shown in the Museum of Modern Art ended up happening in the sense that she ended up being in the Louvre. And believe me, never mention the Museum of Modern Art again. It was the Louvre. So the belief in her, some of her ability to believe in her. I hate doing this, but it is a symptom of that could be coincidence or it could be a symptom that she thought herself capable of everything. Also could be interpreted as a symptom of bipolar syndrome. So those were those two. Even this sounds strange, but some of the sexuality stuff that she was very, very openly. She broke all the rules. And I don't know, she was wonderful. She had all of her lovers were 20 years younger than her. She had many of them. And she was pretty, some of her letters, there was show a certain amount of sexual assertiveness. And again, the letters are published by her daughter. There's not access to her archive yet.
I like the fact that you criticize the fact that we don't know what subtle but clear. The fact that Isabel is not giving, open access to everything. She controls everything.
Yeah, so we don't know whether she censored the letters. We don't know if there's other letters. We don't know anything. But there is one letter. I actually love it because I think it's so subversive in what she said. She's describing her relationship with her last lover, Sapican, who I think is only 18 years younger. She's, I'm going to find it. She says,
it's a wonderful letter.
Oh, she says, she's describing their relationship, which, by the way, he constantly denied that there was that he always claimed that they were a platonic relationship. But
we don't believe it.
Who knows? I mean, but her letters would make it seem that are absolutely not. that they were not a platonic relationship. And in fact, so her letters, by the way, I think the literature, I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful letters. So I will give you an excerpt of a letter that was published. It's my translation. It was published in Isabel Parra's book, El Libro Mayor de Violeta Parra. So we don't know if it's the whole letter. This is the spiciest letter, and steamiest letter, I guess you could say, in the book. We don't know if there's other ones like it. She's describing to a friend her relationship to Sapican. And it says, I'm going to read it because it's beautiful. I'm going to read parts of it. In front of almost the whole neighborhood, and in a blue light that was bluer than the color blue, I received a kiss from him. That kiss was not from a man, but from a hungry lion. That kiss hurt me. And all of those that I received afterward hurt me. They brought me to the bed 3 times to become better acquainted with the lion. And then she clarifies that although it was true that she had wanted to forget Baba, her true love, once and for all, Sapican had been mistaken to think that this was the reason she had latched on to him. She had no reason to do so, and I quote again, "It is well known that Violeta Parra," and she always spoke of herself in the third person, "it is well known that Violeta Parra," and by the way, I hate to say it, but this kind of this kind of big is also a symptom of my bipolar. Okay. "It is well known that Violeta Parra is the most accompanied woman on the planet. Every day at the Peña," which is the folk club that her children run, "some adoring man shows up who would like nothing better than to join me in pulling petals off flowers." At one point in the letter, Parra upends the gender hierarchy by asserting her sexual dominance over Sapican and linking it to her creative powers as a woman. And what she says is this: "I penetrated him like a needle in a complicated embroidery." I mean, and so her power of her very womanly craft, like they wanted to sort of dismiss her in arts and crafts, and she penetrated him. And by the way, this letter was published in 2006, and none of the books that were written about Violeta Parra since, and I think people are a little bit afraid, to be honest, to talk about it. So I never understood why people did not want to use this sentence somewhere in these biographies of Violeta Parra, because I think it's quite stunning that she wrote something so completely flipping the script as a woman as a 49-year-old woman, talking about a man. I mean, just her lover that's not her lover. Because I mean, just so there's that. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, Erica. I've known you as my friend and colleague for so long. We're delighted to have you. Y bienvenidos a todos.
Preséntate, bonito.
Soy la directora asistente del Instituto de América Latina. Sí, trabajo. Y estar aquí con Rubén. Thanks for being here. And so I'm the associate director of the Latin Institute and co-chair of the Latin Studies program. And I'm curious how you went about crafting the book, how you decided like what order to put it in, what to, I haven't read your book. I can't wait to read it, but is it, chronological? That's, you have such rich material, clearly letters and other material, I'm sure that you researched, but I'm curious how you decided what to put in, what, I mean, it's a big question.
Oh, no, I love that.
And also tying on to the last thing you said, what you feel is in this book that you didn't see in other books that you've read.
Cuidado con Manfred.
No, he's if I want to know anything about a song, I look at this because he's so thorough. Let's see. Well, the way of putting the book together was a joy. It was like sort of like quilting. So I actually don't. God, I'm telling you, I'm revealing too much. I have your book outlined by paragraph on my computer. Every single chapter has it's not. And there's a bunch of stuff that I have to cut, believe it or not. And that's all saved because I know it. And but so the quilting, and it kind of came together. At one point I was going to start in the middle of her life because she really does have this turning point. She's 35, I want to say. It's 1952. She's 35. she was making a living singing in bars. They were doing pretty good. She sang with her sister Hilda. They were Las Hermanas Parras, think the Andrews sisters, right? I mean, it's like these are duos. And they were recording already. They had RCA Victor was recording them. They had a radio show. They would sing in this show that was called Canto Lindo or something like that, and it was Fiesta Linda, and it was they would play songs from Mexico. Of course, they would do Agustin Lara and all of the famous songs from Mexico. And because the law required Chilean material, they would put the live music. They would put Las Hermanas Paras in between the songs. So Juan Pablo credits the Hermanas sisters of making Mexican music popular, right, in Chile. And this is all before sort of this awakening she happens, and she has this awakening to the value of folk music. And it's sort of in her biographies, it's sort of treated like a spiritual awakening. And there's many people refer to it as that's when Violeta Parra becomes Violeta Parra, which is kind of true. If she had stayed singing in bars, it would be not a gringa writing a book about her. We wouldn't have, the consul here knowing that she's, this amazing artist that she is. She wouldn't have been. She would have been a bar singer. She would have been known in Chile. So, and it's an awakening, and it's also, I'm a historian, it's an awakening while there's a folk revival going on. So it's an awakening. Everyone is feeling this, everyone who's interested in this culture is feeling this urgency. The songs are dying. The people that are singing them are dying. She goes out by mule. She goes out by horse. She learns how to ride a horse. She goes by bus. She goes by car. She goes by, what's it called? Land Rover, that with her Sergio Larraín. He has money. He rejects his family's fortune except for the cars. He loves the cars. So she goes in a convertible, and she goes in the what's the name of the famous Land Rover company? Anyway, she wants one. She asks the university for one afterwards. She wants one too. The Jeep, something like the Jeep. But she it's British, I think. What's the British company that makes? It's a Land Rover. Right? She calls it a Land Robert or something. She gets the name wrong. But she asks for it specifically in her letter to the Universidad. But anyway, so she's collecting, and so that's the turning point. So at one point, I was going to be really creative and avant-garde and start the biography in the middle, and then go backwards and go forwards. And in a way I did, because I start her childhood by quoting an interview that she does at that turning point in her life, where she says, I've been learning folklore since I was born, which was both true and part of her inventing herself as someone that had never been separated from folklore. She, at one point in the 40s, she's a flamenco artist, because flamenco is very popular and she's very talented at it. She wins a prize. But in this interview where she's sort of declaring herself a folklorista, she says that it's lisuras, but it's nonsense, right? It's just, but that was nonsense. Oh, but she makes sure that they know that she won the prize. She won first place, but that was lisuras. So, and she wrote a song, Piniculado, which is very, very popular. It's a huarache, but now she doesn't really care about that, because so she stops writing huaraches, and she stops writing sort of these more commercial sounding songs, and she becomes this absolute symbol of Chile folklore and all of that in midlife. But I didn't do that. I ended up writing the 10 chapters, which somebody pointed out to me really sort of matches the decima, which is the absolute.
On purpose?
No, it came out that way. But as one of the reviewers pointed it out and said, "Oh, that is kind of perfect." And I'd like to tell you the 10 chapters because I think it worked really well. The first chapter, in a weird way, is the hardest one, because someone's childhood it kind of predicts where you're going to go, but it's not planned that way, right? So she could have learned all these things and done something completely different, right? So, I call it materials, because las materiales que forman mi canto, right? So it was pre any kind of performative Violeta Parra. She's a child, but she's collecting. She does live in places where she'll hear the folklore, and she's also learning popular songs, which are going to sustain her until her mid-30s, because that's how she makes a living. So she's learning valses, and she's learning huaraches, and she's playing with them on the street with her siblings, because they're quite poor at one point. Also, I'm sure everyone knows, but if you don't know, the Parra family are all geniuses. She's Nicanor Parra's sister, Roberto Parra, Lalo Parra. I mean, they're just unbelievably able to create poetry, this family, and art. So anyway, so I call it materiales. And then there's this huge chunk of her life. It's 20 years, and she only lived to be 49. Where she was basically making a living for herself and having 3 of her 4 children. She's not a folklorista. She's not authentic. She's nothing. She's Las Hermanas Parra. And I call it antimateriales, borrowing from Nicanor because anti-materials, because it's kind of like that's really she really does reject that when she becomes the symbol of folk, right? She can no longer sing she can't sing Kimikura that she wrote. We don't even have any idea what the song sounded. She can't sing the boleros that she wrote, right? So there's that. So it's anti-materiales, and then it's folklorista, where really everyone and her time and sense said she was amazing at it, and it was like this is who she really was, right? Folklorista. And then it's her first European trip, which was very exciting. And then I have a whole two chapters because I couldn't fit in one that I call Violeta Volcanica, and then Volcanic Violeta, because she comes back from Europe and already on the boat. So up till Europe, she's folklorista, and folklorista in Spanish means folk singer and folk collector. It means both, and she's both. And then she goes to Europe and she's hanging out in the Violeta in the 1950s, and she's playing at the same club that Barbara Garcia Marquez is playing in a duo with Jesus Soto because they have to make a living. One of her roommates is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's ex, Tachia, a Spanish actress, although I'm not sure if she meant Garcia Marquez, but everyone's there. Garcia Marquez is the one who then said that Paris was the capital of Latin America in the 1980s. And it's so. And they're visual artists, they're people that are paying their tuition and their board by playing music, but that are going to Bellas Artes, and they're just fine art. They're just amazing artists. And of course, she says I can do that too. So she comes back on the boat to the ocean liner from Paris to Chile, and she invents these anticuetas, which are these guitar pieces that are these amazing improvisations that classical musicians in Chile have said are the best compositions to come out of Chile. They're gorgeous. If you haven't heard them, listen to them. They're completely atonal and modern and experimental. And she starts doing her art, and she starts doing her poetry, and she starts doing whatever she wants. And it's completely not confined to I will collect folklore and then write songs that sound like they could be folklore, which she definitely did also. But it's like, I'm going to break all the rules. I'm going to do whatever I want. She has one piece. If you hear one piece from her, listen to El Gavilan. It's 8 minutes long or 12 minutes long, depending on the recording. And it's the music for ballet. She never did the ballet, but she was going to do a folk ballet. I mean, who's thinking of this, right? And she knew what dancers she wanted, and they had to be the modern dancers because, as she criticizes the Chilean ballet company, they're really just too Europeanized. They're not really doing Chilean. She had the modern ballet company was very new. I think it was like, brand new, and she knew which dancers were going to play what parts, and she was going to be, I think it was like Aina, but anyway, because you couldn't be conservatory voice because it was a part of suffering, and it had to be someone who knew what suffering was, and that was the answer. So, anyway. Yeah, I think I have two more. Europe too. Sorry, then go back to Europe. There's an art, one on with her just Europe and her art in Europe, and then it's Nueva Canción, new songs, because it's La Peña, and she comes back, and it's not called new song yet, but it's all taking part off, and then of course the last chapter's last song. Makes sense. Okay. Brian, sorry.
I'm Brian Pitts, the Assistant Director of the Latin American Institute. Thank you so much for being here today. It's fabulous to finally hear about the book after to hear you talk about the book after knowing about the book for so long. So I think I can probably speak for all of my fellow historians in the room. Could you tell us a little bit more about your sources, specifically like maybe thinking in terms of like how, to what extent do you rely on the same sources used by previous biographies of Violeta Parra? And to what extent do you rely on new sources that you've incorporated, or maybe reinterpretations of old sources?
Absolutely. So I was aided by actually UCLA during the COVID. So I'm obsessive. So any sources anyone else used, I managed to get hold of. I think I've got a lot of the European press was more, I think, my contribution. I speak French, which I think helps, and some biographers probably didn't have. Well, also some of the biographers, except for Herrera, it was pre-digital age. So that was helpful. I think that what I've discovered, everyone else, the kinds of things that are becoming available, other people have access to now too. I don't want to pretend like I found. I did find one article that was miscited in Eva that I think is really important. But So I found a few sources that I think other people didn't have, but I was really aided by, and this shows sort of my obsession. During COVID, you could take out any book in the world that was digitalized by Happy Trust. You had to be at an R1 institution like UCLA, but I have good friends that are R1 institutions, and you could do a word search for Violeta Parra before 1967, because my rule was it was after she was dead, I couldn't look at it because I had too much to do. And you could literally find out anything that was digitalized from anywhere, and you could check it out, as opposed to having to go to the library where it was housed and check it out. That was for 1 year, I want to say. I don't know if any of you took advantage of this, but
Yeah.
I did. It was a very strange moment because you could literally go, you know how Google Books give you snippets? You could check out. And then, okay, we're going to do this. So there was that. And then also during COVID, people were incredibly, incredibly generous. People that weren't supposed to help me, like I have the letter from, I have the report. I shouldn't say this, but I have the report from the ambassador of Chile about Parra's exhibit that he sent to Chile. And I could have gotten it if I went to Chile, and I did go to Chile afterwards, so it's okay. But I didn't go to, somebody was kind enough to PDF me, even though you're not supposed to because the libraries were closed. And so they were just, people were so amazing. While if people were working and the libraries were closed, they kind of were really helpful. And they said, we're not supposed to do research for people, but here's the PDF, you know, and it was, so it's mostly just a repeat of what's in the catalog, but at least we know what he said. And I would have gotten it. I don't feel so bad because I would have gone and looked at it in Chile. But it was that kind of, like, I had librarians all over the world researching for me at that point because they were so kind and generous. And also because even librarians who hadn't heard of her, once they Googled her, they went, oh, this is really interesting. We should be helping this project. So, I think that the strange thing, the one thing that I didn't do, I did not conduct interviews. And the reason I didn't is because I think everyone has been interviewed. Like literally the woman who shared a desk with her in elementary school has been interviewed. I'm sure that's passed on. Her whole family has been interviewed so many times. And, it's at this point, I'm not sure that I would have learned anything new. And so as a historian, it's kind of strange because I'm dealing with published interviews, published letters, and the press mostly. And you always wish there was something less constructed than these sources, but life is like as a historian, you never you never get to know her. Like you never get to sit down and say, well, you tell me what you think about all of this, So I think that I was very thorough. And I should say, I know her music. I mean, I'm a musician. So I think that really also, I know her. I mean, I'll read the end of, which is it's true. I have to write about her suicide, and that's really hard, right? So I'll read you because for me it worked. This is how I solved the problem. I'll read you the beginning of chapter 10 because it says how the music is part of sort of my life. I face writing this final chapter with trepidation, as I fear that as a biographer, I will be expected to explain the act, foretold yet unfathomable, of Parra's suicide. And Parra had many attempted suicides before she committed suicide. Oftentimes in my life, a specific line from a song will surface from memory to consciousness that captures how I'm feeling in that moment and guides my steps forward. The lyric that comes to mind when I contemplate the last months of Parra's life is from her experimental piece, The Sparrowhawk of Gavilan. I have no place to be. Yo no tengo donde estar. Parra sings the phrase 3 times in a row, like a mantra, slowing down with each repetition. I hold that these few words, with their halting cadence, express the underlying tensions of Parra's final months far better than any I could produce for that purpose. So, I mean, yo no tengo donde estar. I mean, she said it, but I think she said it better than any of us could. I have no place to be.
Regarding interviews, Erika, I sort of maybe disagree a little bit in the sense that one never knows who the interview with whom might give you really good. For example, when I was researching for our book on Latin American and on Chilean film, by chance, I interviewed Sergio Bravo, the genius.
I know.
Did I tell you?
Yeah, I've read. Oh, of course.
You read what Manfred has?
Yeah,
the
the letter,
No,
absolutely.
but
Oh.
it's not on the book because I decided to
Oh.
try. He just died, so
Oh,
I
so
feel
sorry,
like it's
yeah.
sort of between us. I don't know that they were lovers.
Oh.
Not only were they lovers, I was having lunch at the hub. This guy is a genius, really, just as much as Violeta. Both from the Communist Party at the time. But when I was in his house having lunch, suddenly his wife, the moment I mentioned Violeta, stood up and really, obviously, angrily. I have no idea. No, don't talk about that. So after he told me, and then Sonia, the wife, told me, Violeta used to send love letters. Actually, one of them proposing marriage to Sergio in the Communist Party. So they would communicate the affairs. So all that must be there in the Communist, I mean, the office of the Communist Party in Chile, maybe. Yeah. Un tesoro. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
And you know that the first movie Violeta participated is in Sergio Bravo's movie, remember?
Yeah.
It's Mimbre.
Incredible.
By total chance, because Sergio Bravo showed Violeta, said, can you listen, just look at my images. This will have music by Bach. He said, and she says, no, this is my music. And she improvised, and they did. It's maravilloso.
Maravilloso.
Es maravilloso eso.
One of the ejes of the
Yes,
20th century.
yeah. So there, go ahead, find it in the Communist Party. I'm sure
I'm going to go
there.
So see, then, and that gives me a good excuse to do a second edition because I want to pick some of that stuff. But Fernando Venegas, I'm so sorry. But so
We'll help you
take
get the
that-
pictures.
Yeah. So this is my theory. I think Chileans are always going to know things that I don't know. Like it's
No.
yeah. No, in the best way. No, in the best way.
No, but it's
No.
not true. You know many things that Chileans don't. I mean,
I'll just say I was just while I was getting the manuscript ready to. I learned one thing that anyway. I'm just teasing. I'm not really. I think what is beautiful is I do think other things will come up. This is I didn't know. The rumor is that she had an affair with Sergio Larraín. It wouldn't surprise me if she had this. Yeah, but
they were very close, but I don't know that.
Yeah. No, of course not. So that's really amazing, and I guess I probably could have. You're right. Learned other things.
By interviewing
Other people, yeah. I guess it just wasn't. It just maybe it's my personality. I felt like kind of shy or doing that or something. I also had read there's a sort of story that's it was in Fernando Alegria's paper. Someone else was writing. I don't call it a biography. It's in English, but it feels like a historic novel to me, and it's just. I don't like the book particularly, but she talks about going to. Well, I don't know if you know, but it's sometimes hard. The Parra family can be very difficult. So that was hard. So I didn't really want to put myself through that because she described how Isabel Parra basically kicked her out of the office when she asked for if she could, get information. And then she talks about meeting Lalo Parra at Peña and how he said, "Of course, I'm going to help you." And she's very patiently waiting the next day for him to show up. And I was thinking, what are you thinking? Like just because he said at Peña that he was going to help you the next day. Sorry, but es bien inconstante and Lalo Parra, right? Like you don't believe everything someone says to you at a Peña after too much wine. And she seemed so hurt by it. And I was like, and I just didn't want to, I don't know. I guess I'm just not my personality to kind of go up to strangers and say, tell me intimate details about someone. I mean,
it takes a long time to
yeah, exactly. So that was just, it's just, I chose not to. Maybe we should say that more than but there is a lot of published interviews. And now I regret not interviewing Sergio Bravo. Yeah. I had lots of conversations with people that worked with, I guess I had conversations with a few people that knew her, but
the other person you might interview here is Sebastian Edward, because Sebastian's father, when at time he organized las ferias en el mercado, ¿cómo se llamaba? Feria
de las
Artes Libres.
Feria de Artes Plásticas.
That's right. So Hernán, Sebastian's father, was very close with Violeta. Actually, he really, because he's such a high class in Chile, socially, that the fact that he liked Violeta helped Violeta move up the ladder in Santiago. So he was very crucial in
and
Violeta.
What is his name?
His name is, remember Sebastian Edward?
I remember that, yeah.
His father, Hernán Edward.
And, okay.
He's dead, but Sebastian knows everything because he remembered.
Yeah.
Remember in our...
Yeah, he told us,
He told us the story there, So there are people still
absolutely.
Ruben, yes.
So, Erika, thank you again for being here and for the book. You have talked about how Violeta Parra crafted this persona
Yeah.
about herself, and this is somewhat connected to Veronica's point. My question is how did the times that she lived in through crafted her? How were the
Yeah.
different historical moments that she lived through influenced her, crafted, took and impacted her trajectory as a woman, as an artist?
That's a great question. So I do think she was of her times in that sense. She was, and I think she was always at the vanguard. So I do understand why people say she's ahead of her times because it's true because she's always leading people. She really is. So the folkloric revival. She doesn't quite start it. Margot Loyola, who's a very famous folklorist in Chile, Chilean folklorist, discovers her, or she claims one of the many people that discovers her. Many people discover her. But Margot Loyola did take her around to the radio stations. And Violeta Parra really did understand the folklore revival, and also the folklore revival was very welcoming of women. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. So that Margot Loyola and Violeta Parra are at the forefront, and they're women and they're leaders. And one is, I think, that women are identified in the gendered division of labor in this time period. Women are identified with the earth, with tradition, with the past, and men are inventive and authorial, and they're modern, right? So women were not, it's not a threat for a woman to be a folklorista. It's perfect. I also think there's this thing about these actas folklóricas, these folkloric shows that were very didactic, and you need two people to dance a cueca. You need a man and a woman, right? So it's very, and there were songs that tonadas were the women's songs and the cuecas were the men's songs, and not women too, but there was a lot of division of sort of traditional genres that were sort of defined by, male or female, and you'll be shocked to know this just to show how gendered things are, but how things change. The guitar was a woman's instrument until about 1910, which is shocking. So that people would sort of say, oh, he's not a real man if they played the guitar. And then in the 1920s, it became, no, it was
Interesting.
yeah. So these rules, of course, are not real and they change, but they shape music. In fact, the way she performed with her sisters, her brothers performed, that was very typical of Chile, that you would have all female or all male groups, and also very typical that you'd have family groups. Anyway, so the folklore, it makes sense that she was recognized and lifted up. She won a prize for being the best folklorista, and in fact, in some ways, I think at the end of the life, it messed her up because she was so identified with the 1950s folklore that she was no one noticed she was doing this amazing stuff in the 1960s that was absolutely, at the forefront of protest music and all of this, and they kept on thinking she was that folklore sort of creature of the 1950s. They didn't see her. So the next thing, I would say that in terms of La Nueva Canción and also modern art, not easy to be a woman. She was, Picasso was considered, there's this wonderful interview in Eva by Jorge Edwards. I don't know the relation, but I'm sure there is one. And she talks about how Picasso is the future of primitivism and how Violeta Parra likes Picasso. She comes back from Paris liking Picasso and African art. She likes them both. But no one, her tapestries today, you could look at them and say they're Picasso. I mean, there's nothing not avant-garde about them, but because she was a woman and she embroidered them, they weren't seen that way. So I think that she was not really, she was very easily slotted into the category of folklore in terms of her visual art. And then I think with the protest music, it was extremely hard, both because she's a woman and because she was in her 40s. I mean, this was the youth revolution. There's 3 entertainment magazines aimed at youth. They all appear between 63 and 65 in Chile. There aren't ones before. It's Rincon de la Juventud. I mean, they have the word joven in their title, and they're pop, and they have Bob Dylan in them, and they have mini skirts, and they have Isabel Parra and Ángel Parra all the time. And then the one article that's about Violeta says, it's from the point of view of the children, says, nuestra madre es nuestra mayor orgullo. Like, our mother is our great pride, but it's about the kids, right? Oh my God, there's this one record company, Demon sounds, where they I have to write a whole section why she's not embraced by the New Song movement. It's not called New Song yet. But Demon, so Demon is the rival. She's now with Odeon Chileno, and so Demon is the rival. It's new. They're doing neo folklore, right? They do all of the artists of the Nueva Canción, and they do Las Cuatro Brujas, and they're doing this whole kind of. To me, it sounds like doo-wop meets Chilean folklore. It's like very strange music that did not last. But he writes a review of Isabel Parra's album, right? And I have to find this because it's just. I'm sorry. I didn't know I would want to read this to you. But it's about, I think it's under the limits of authenticity. He's writing about Isabel Parra and he really makes it sound as if she's dead. Because she's, Isabel Parra, she's writing about the daughter, right? And he says, this is the review he gives. He declares Isabel, quote, this is the year before she commits suicide. The most popular and highest quality woman singer of our folklore. Then he follows with a statement that could be interpreted as implying that Violeta was somehow no longer alive. The daughter of Violeta Parra, Isabel had become her mother's successor, thanks to the rich legacy bequeathed to her in life. Now, mind you, Violeta Parra is not on his album, right, his label. But that's pretty harsh, right? And there's another one where they literally call the children, like the young people, and she's la más antigua of our singers. And the antigua can mean many things, but it can mean passé, it can mean old-fashioned, it can mean anything. And she's writing these songs that all of the Nueva Canción artists are going to perform. I'm sorry, I can't wait. I'm sorry, you have to leave.
Yes,
sorry.
aquí
Yeah,
tengo
okay. My apologies for starting late. Yes.
Well, I'm Juan Hernandez, and I'm part of Pro Chile. Well,
We
we've
talked on
talked.
the phone. I know it's
and,
not really
And how do you let it not? You're a big fan. Like you've been obsessed with Violeta since you were 19. I remember you saying.
Well,
And
14 biggest.
14. Okay, even if you're 5 more years. And how do you let that? How do you avoid becoming a book of a fan, like and be a scholar talking about a subject?
Well, we're trained historians, so we're terrible. Like I have things that I would have loved to write. There's this one wonderful theme that it's in one of the books, the most popular books about her. It used to be called Gracias a la Vida. It's books of testimonies, and it has this wonderful story where she's these. The campesinos find out she's in the town and one of the babies has died, and they ask her to come and sing and awaken. It's kind of like really, it's significant because it sort of goes full circle. Suddenly she's being asked to participate in these ceremonies that she kind of elevated to become authentic, but she's actually participating in one. And then I find another little article. It was written in some Solidarity magazine in 1983 that no one else knows exists. And it says that's not what happened, something different. Like it's like one is the child's memory, one is the grown-up's memory. And the grown-up's memory is they passed a procession and they joined it. It's not, no one went to find her, like completely different stories. So as a historian, I can't use the one that I want to. It kills you. It just hurts. And so there's this kind of like this oath of office we take that the one standard of because I like to teach my students what the standards of our profession are. And by the way, the History Channel does not have them. I sat next to someone who works in the History Channel, and I said, "Oh, I'm so excited. Where are the standards? I couldn't find them on the website. Now you'll tell me where they are." And they said, "No, we don't have any." So, but the AHA, the American Historical Association, has standards, and if you lie, they're gonna, that's kind of ruining the whole thing. And I think in this day and age, even more so. Yeah. So there's that kind of like, I can't. I'm not allowed to. And then I have to say, I think it's a really hard thing to do because I didn't want people to think that I didn't think she was fantastic. I certainly didn't want them for them to think I was sort of saying she was inauthentic or fake or phony, because I don't think any of those things. I actually think she believed she was everything that she said she was, profoundly. And then the other one is that, so, and I think other people think I actually know one from one review that one person think I didn't take it far enough, that I was trying to protect her. He said I was protective, which I do think, same thing with she was, one of the reasons she was very isolated at the end of her life is it sounds like she became a miserable person to be around. Nicanor Parra wrote an artifact where he says, vieja insoportable. Like, but he was defending her, but that's what people would say about it, right? So,
Voting what
he-
others.
yeah, what other would
He's
say,
not saying that.
like that's, and they know, and that they would kind of hide when they saw her. And he loved her. He, this was not, he was mad at them, but that would be what people would say. And so, and even, oh my God, this wonderful, because of his defense of the Violeta Parra talks how she's a sheep in wolf's clothing. And Eduardo Carrasco from Quitabayo points out that means that most people only know the wolf side. Which I love. So yeah, so she was really hard to be with.
I have a question.
Kevin,
Hey, Erica, congratulations. on
Thank
this
you.
fabulous book. What did you leave out and what are you going to do with it?
Oh my God, what did I leave out? I left out sort of more examples of how wonderful she was. Like there's this one, she's giving advice to a young man that she met at a concert, and she's telling him to not listen to anybody, to not care what anybody says. And he says, it takes a lot, it takes, there's some expression that she used about, I'm going to misuse it, but it's basically an expression that it takes a lot of energy. It's hard to shit in a bucket. And it's like, I just love this kind of very crass sort of instructions to people to not worry about other things. That if you follow your own heart, you're going to do the good work. Just a lot of little examples like that. Sort of more examples of the way she was so. There's a Chilean word that I have learned in the process of writing this. It's patuda, and I've heard that there's no translation. So I've tried to translate it as, and it's not gendered. I've heard that men are patudo. So that's very important, because I thought, well, maybe. So the best translation I can give is it's outrageously scandalous or scandalously outrageous. I'm not sure which, but it's just
For
she was.
patuda,
Yeah,
neither.
patuda.
No, neither. No.
Okay, so what would you say? Is
Hard to translate.
so you wouldn't say it's outrageous?
No. Patuda is to do things that you don't ask for. Please, can I do? I'll take it.
And you take my arm.
Yeah.
Having
Like
a ball.
shameless?
Oh,
Yeah.
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 Shameless. Yeah,
Shameless.
I thought of that one too.
Right.
Shameless.
Say question like our web.
She's shameless. Yeah, that could have been good. All right. When I second edition, she's gonna be shameless.
Yeah, that's.
I'll get back. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
I have a question now that you mentioned
this
Nicanor.
Chileno.
Oh, okay.
How, or if you address in the book the influence of Nicanor Parra and Violeta Parra, or the other way around?
Oh, so yeah, no, I definitely do. You can't not. So I really, and so there's a wonderful. Everyone says it, although I've never seen her say it in an interview. Everyone says that she used to say, "Sin Nicanor no hay Violeta." So Isabel says she says that, and Nicanor says it. So there's two people that say it, but I've never seen Violeta Parra say it, and I've actually seen versions. There's one version where her brother tells her she should go out and get these folk songs, but there's this wonderful article published in some newspaper in Concepcion where she says, "Oh yeah, I went and showed my brother these songs that I collected, and he was so stunned. He'd never heard anything like them before." So she just flipped. I think probably Nicanor told her that you should go out and collect this stuff. That's the most common thing. But she definitely has one version where, and she said that. She says, "My brother's always been able to guide me." But she does have one version where she tells him about the folklore, which I love. So definitely, but there's even, I go back in her childhood years, Nicanor, first of all, it's important to know that Nicanor gets to go to the Instituto Nacional Barros Arana, INBA, that this is this beautiful boarding school that at the time is a whole block. So it has its own post office, it has a heated swimming pool, it has a tailor. It's like where young, very talented people from the provinces are brought to the city and they're being prepared to go to the university. And Patricio Aylwin was a product of it, and so was Nicanor Parra, and so are many, many prizes in science and in literature. It was amazing. And it was an all-boys school, it still is. And Violeta Parra went to the Escuela Normal, which is the equivalent of high school. You don't have to have done high school and you become a trainer. So, but while she was going to the Escuela Normal and Nicanor Parra was with they're a group of people, Enrique Lin is one, they're so amazing that they're called los míticos de la Inba, because they were Pedrosa. There's all of these different artists are with him at that time. They're publishing surrealist magazines of literature. Who's the other one? Oyarsun? Oyarsun. So there's these míticos, they avienda, and they go and hang out at the house where Violeta Parra spends her weekends. And so they do plays and they do all of this stuff. I have a footnote, if I can read it from Oyarsun, because it just sort of captures the moment. And Nicanor says, am I doing too much? Do we need to stop me? Because, you know, I love that.
Brian, ¿cuánto tiempo tenemos?
Todavía hay preguntas, ¿no?
Okay, so Gaby.
Yeah.
Well, no, let me find this because I want to read you what I want to tell you what Nicanor says about the school.
Tengo que dejar un tiempo para el vino, ¿no? Entonces.
Oh yeah, please. Okay, now I'm gonna finish fast. Okay, now I'm ready. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, okay, but this is just so much fun because he's a thinking, but this is how he describes it. He says that he would later attest the magnitude of the education, both formal and informal, that he received there. It had opened him to the spirit of modern culture. That's literally what he says. And then 38, I'm going to find the footnote, number 8, chapter 2. There, because it just captures like how poetic these people were. I won't find it. It's not where I thought it was.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
okay,
fine.
Gaby.
So anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Start.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have just a simple question. What is your most memorable experience writing this book?
Well, so I have a friend. Her name is Nancy Morris. She's emeritus from Temple
She
University.
came to our conference.
Yes, she was here. She this about maybe like 5 years ago. I ran into her at a conference. We were on the same panel. She wrote about Nuevo Canto in Chile. I started sending her chapters 5 years ago. She has read every single version. I think she wrote this book with me. She read every single version of every single chapter. She would we're both wordsmiths. That's the word for it. And so we're looking for a word, and she would like text me from a yoga class, and she'd have found the word. And then she and Patricia Vilches, who's a Chilean literary professor, they did, and as a total act of love. So there's beautiful translations in this book. I had nothing to do with them. These two women spent hours translating the decimas of her autobiography and the lyrics of her songs, and they would go back and forth. And the mama, because there's a lot of like colloquialisms, they did an incredible job. And I think once she had the word puddles for charcos, and it just sounded wrong. So I said, let's find it different. I think we went to wetlands, which sounds better than charco. Puddle just sounded so unpoetic. So I think that was the one comment I made in all of them. I purposefully stayed out of the conversations. It was the greatest gift that I was given. So it is a collective project, and it was just, and you know, they do this because they love it, not because I could pay for them. I can't pay people to do anything.
It's giant. It's a joy.
Yeah.
That's exactly. She's writing a dissertation. It's great that you transmit that, because that's what it should be.
Yeah, and Nancy, to this day, we're going to go down, which is backwards, but we're going to go to Chile in November because it's the Feria del Libro, and we're going to go down to on a pilgrimage to go where she was born. Which
Be careful, San Carlos, te van a odiar.
Okay, no, I don't say anything. I just say what the family says, and then I say I do not take a position.
Yes.
I do not. I say this.
Nació en San Fabián del
Oh yeah, I do in the beginning. I do say that you're
And
right.
they will
Yeah.
notice and they will not.
Well, I do say in my introduction, in the end, this telling of Violeta Parra's life story results from my sifting, weighing, and selecting from available and sometimes contradictory sources.
Yes.
It goes without saying that any errors that derive from that process are my responsibility.
Okay, last question.
Bernardo,
Siena, tú tenías una. Oh, Siena tenía primero. First, women first. No, he had the hand first.
Okay, really quickly, I just wanted to ask about Violeta's political alliances, or how she was working through politics in her music and afterwards, and how her reputation was taken up in Chile post-dictatorship to now.
Okay, so those are kind of two different questions. But during her lifetime, she was definitely a communist supporter. She was what was called a fellow traveler. That's the best word, because when you say communist sympathizer, that sounds like bad. That's Cold War. So I'd say communist supporter. I don't really have a good way for it, but the French call them the fellow travelers. It's people that are not card carrying, and believe me, she would never have been a card carrying member. I don't think she would have been kicked out of the party within 5 seconds, because they had all of these kind of morality codes. that everyone had to follow except for Pablo Neruda and this one, but everyone else had to follow them. And so she would have not lasted, but she did marry a communist. Her first husband was a communist, so for 10 years she was really metido in the partido. But as a communist, he really felt that his sense of manhood was associated with being a party member and protecting his wife and children. And so it didn't work out because she just couldn't stay at home. But she was very much on the side of the pueblo. She had experienced poverty as a young woman, and she just, I would say it's fair to say that she hated the rich. Not individually, she had rich friends, but what is it? Because one of the members of the Communist Party said that he'd never met anyone who could putear like the Parra. And so, you had to be very careful. And the way he described one incident, he said she really did have a strong class consciousness. Let's put it that way. So I think there's that, and then afterwards, she became a symbol. I think first of Nueva Canción, and then of course of resistance to the military. And I think ever since she has inspired generations. There's no question that the feminist movement in Chile sings her songs. The student movement sings her songs, and there's no question that other people try to co-opt her. There was some very conservative politician who tried to use her image on one thing, and the Fundación Violeta Parra made him cease doing it. So there will always be people that try to. I think there's this in the book. I say that the fear now is that neoliberalism will make us forget who she is, because everything can be bought and sold, basically. Which I don't think she can. I don't think she can be. So I'm contradicting myself. Everyone, you can try to turn anything into merchandise.
Burnout back there.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Erica.
Thank you.
The book recently arrived, and I'm looking forward to cracking it open this summer. I'm curious if you could maybe speak to just a little bit about Violeta's relationship to indigenous culture throughout her life.
So that's one of the things I left out of the book, but I'm pretty sure I just didn't have time for it. So she grew up. One of the places she lived as a child was Lautaro, which is extremely was very Mapuche at the time. And Nicanor says that he learned how to count in Mapudungun at that point, and also he clearly became someone who supported indigenous rights throughout his life. And Violeta Parra wrote some of the first. She's very, very loved and appreciated, from what I understand, in the Mapuche community, because she wrote some of the first songs that acknowledged and she also had pieces of art that acknowledged how brutal colonial the conquest was. She has two amazing, huge tapestries that acknowledge the brutality of the conquest, and she has a song Arauco Tribunate, and then she also has El Guiatun, which is about just describing a ceremony, but she clearly, and then she would bring in, she recorded, she collected songs among the Mapuche, and she brought Mapuche artists to her carpa to perform as well. So she was very, she recognized the importance and the authenticity and the sort of mistreatment of indigenous people before it was trendy, really, I would say, in Chile. Now, the other confusing thing, so she gets to Europe in the 60s, and everybody wants, this, like the Fruta Indien, which is the Quena, is about to take off and become the best-selling album of, all time in France. I'm exaggerating, but like people are just craving sort of indigenous culture. It's like anything that's not mass consumerism. And is this true? The first time that people assign her, or she assigns herself, we don't know because they're interviews, indigenous heritage is in Argentina, which makes sense because this man clearly saw her as other, right? So Argentine Guibo, I'm sure he looked European, and he said, so in that one, she has a bisabuela, a great-grandmother, who is indigenous, and that's in 62. And by the time she leaves France, I'm sorry, but she's gone from having a bisabuela to a grandmother to a mother, and then a few people say she actually is indigenous. So there's this kind of incredible shortening of and sort of adoption of an indigenous this is the creation of a person, right? So indigenous persona, and it doesn't happen in Chile. No one ever, and she never asserts, and she writes a whole autobiography where she talks about all of her ancestors. She never mentions that there's an indigenous person in the family, because in Chile, no one's going to call her indigenous. It's just like indigenous people speak indigenous languages, and they live in certain territories, and they have certain houses. And if you're not that, then you're not indigenous. So she would never try. She wasn't, yeah, absolutely not. But she kind of played into the European. If they wanted to see her that way, well, I have a grandmother, I have a great grandmother, my mom.
Una última pregunta, if anybody has one. If not, why don't we go and have a glass of wine and thank you.
And I brought books. I did.
And also, for those who will be enjoying the wine, it was provided to us today by a Chilean distributor, Enzo Maldonado, sitting here in the back. He is able to, if you want a Chilean wine for your own events, your own departments or anything, talk to him. You guys contact information afterwards.
Con contacto.
Lo tengo. And for those of you who have been watching online, thank